Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the Empowered Performance Podcast. Today, we have a special guest, Steve Whyte. Of the coaches that I'm following on social media right now, he's probably on the best run of posts that I agree with and find inspiration with. So he's definitely a coach that I'm excited to speak to. Steve, if you wouldn't mind doing a quick introduction on your athletic background and your current coaching role, please share with the guests.
Yeah, man. Yeah, sure. No, first, thanks for having me on. As I said, this is my first pod, so you have my podcast virginity. A lot of pressure there too. The 3, 2, 1 countdown. I was
Oh,
like,
yeah, yeah.
cool, and then yeah, it gets the heart pumping a little bit. But yeah, man. So training and athletics has always been a part of my life. You
Yeah,
got
you're
me?
back. Yep, I got you.
So yeah, this is my second career. I have a bit of I would say, an atypical path as a strength and conditioning coach. I was formerly a special education teacher and hockey coach, and I also coached unified track and field, so like special education, Special Olympics track and field, which was a blast. And prior to that, my college background, I don't have a formal education in strength and conditioning. So I'm not classically trained. My degree was in sports and rec management, which I think I chose because I know I chose because it had sports in the title. That's the only reason. I didn't know what I want to do. Plan A growing up, dude, was be a professional hockey player. That was it. I was like the stereotypical jock athlete where every paper I wrote in high school was about hockey. Everything I did was about hockey. So hockey was my number one love, but I played a number of sports growing up. Baseball was probably number two. I played a few years of football. And are we allowed to curse on the podcast? Is that
I
allowed?
don't like to censor people.
I can let it rip.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay, no.
Yeah.
Okay, no. I fucking hated football practice. It was the worst. That was the one sport where, like, on the way to the field, I would be just like dreading. When it rained out, I'd be stoked because maybe football practice is going to get canceled. It was just miserable. But so I had a few years of football, and I actually played freshman football in high school, which I liked quite a bit more. And compared to hockey, football is easy, by the way. I'm going to stir some pots here with the football players, but you get to grab people with your hands, easy. You can wrap them up. Hockey, you got to have timing. You got to be precise. Football's an easy game. And I think I mentioned I played lacrosse as well. I have a fun lacrosse story I can get into later if we want to. But point being, all this to say, moving and athletics has always been a big part of my life and a big part of my identity. And why I didn't pursue it as a career is beyond me. I think I even took one of those like aptitude tests in high school where it's like trying to place you where, like, what your career path should be. And it said like personal trainer, or PE, something along those lines. And I was like, oh, there's no money in that. So I became a teacher because everybody knows that's where you get rich. But I became a teacher because my mother's a teacher, my grandmother's a teacher. So I've always had, I guess, a proclivity for instruction and working with others, particularly with kids and high school students. And so that's kind of been my path. An irregular path, I guess, to strength and conditioning, but I have a lot of similarities to everybody who had the typical path. So my education has been very much self-driven. I got my CSCS 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I forget, dude. They're flying by. The years are flying by, so it gets lost. So when I was still teaching at the high school, so I know I just bounced around all over the place. That was the brain dump part of the podcast. But while I was still teaching, I left teaching 2 years ago. This is my third year not teaching and second year not coaching hockey. So I coached hockey for an additional year at the high school for 1 year after I was done teaching. My last year teaching, I was reading the CSCS book, like between periods during lunchtime on multiple occasions, face down, falling asleep, sleeping in the book. So that was the kind of the transition process from going from teacher to strength and conditioning. And now here I am. So I work at a private facility in Plymouth, Massachusetts. We're about an hour south of Boston, and it's a facility called MB Performance in Plymouth. And we get to work with the full gamut. And it's been a great place for me to develop because I've gotten touches with all types of personnel, from little 9-year-olds who are just developing all the way up to, I think our oldest is in their mid-60s, our oldest general pop client. And then we have, now it's primarily a performance gym. So bread and butter is middle school, high school, and collegiate athletes. We have a spattering of primarily like D2, D3 athletes, a spattering of D1 athletes. And we've had a couple professionals in and out of the door. And all this to say that I've gotten touches with a wide breadth of ability levels. So it's been a cool place to develop.
I actually want to share how similar my situation is to yours. A couple differences. One, I certainly didn't go to school to become a trainer. I went to college to play soccer. I had the aspiration of being a professional player. I wasn't good enough. And the things that were holding me back were more the mental side of things and the physical side of things. As far as skill and like and understanding of the game, I thought I was actually a pretty sharp player. But the physical side, I felt like it held me back, and I would work really hard physically, but I didn't understand general adaptation syndrome, which essentially just means if you do too little, you don't make enough gains, but if you do way too much, you actually reduce your performance. And I was the type to do way too much. There was a gym owner in town where I went to college, and he gave me the keys to his gym. It was like a Rocky Balboa style-esque gym. And at 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night, or something like that, when I should be sleeping before an early morning session the next day or something like that, I would be lifting in the gym. And so we had practice 4 times a week. We had 2 games a week, sometimes 3. I would do at least 3 individual skill sessions a week. I would lift 4 or 5 times a week. I would do the dumbest lifting you could possibly do. I would just get like as jacked as I could in my upper body, which doesn't look like anything now. It's been a few years, but I wouldn't focus on, producing a lot of force through the legs, for example, which I don't know if it's pretty important for sports like soccer or hockey, for example.
Yeah, I hear it's
And
pretty
then as far
important.
as my actual degree, it was a business degree. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I
Yeah.
had a business degree just because I thought, if I don't go pro, I can at least have a sensible degree to get a job and make some money and all that stuff. But then I hated the idea of a 9 to 5. So I went into soccer coaching. I did that at the high school level, and I did club. So I worked with, kids from like 9 to 12. And then I worked with high schoolers, and I really enjoyed high school. I felt that age group was a little bit better suited for me. And I felt in that kind of setting, the kids were a little bit more motivated. With club, I didn't like the youth sports culture, which is definitely something I want to touch on since you work with a lot of youth sports
Yep,
athletes.
absolutely,
But I
dude.
just it wasn't the best hours, it wasn't the best pay, and I just didn't like the environment itself. I found it to be toxic from the parents to, just all across the board. And it kind of perverted the game that I love so much because kids didn't even play for enjoyment or development anymore. So it kind of gave me a bad feel for it. And I still wanted to be in the coaching realm, and I still cared about the physical aspect of things. So just like you're saying, I got a CSCS textbook, and I studied for 2 years to be able to pass that test. Because I just do not have a scientific background. It was super challenging. And the thing that actually got me to pass the test was Mario Kart, and a CSCS Pocket Prep app. So I do like a 10-question quiz and then do a Mario Kart race and just go back and forth for hours until I
I love
eventually
it.
like material well enough that I could pass the test.
Yeah.
As far as my first strength and conditioning internship, I've had my boss from that on the podcast before. His name is Clay Mefford. I was in Cincinnati because that's where my wife was going to school at the time.
Okay.
And I had an internship at a facility very similar to yours with middle school, high school, and some collegiate athletes. And then the sister location would have the professional athletes. And man, what a great experience, because when you first get into the field, you might have the idea, I want to work with the best athletes. And then you realize very quickly that maybe you don't like working with some athletes, even if they're really good. Maybe they don't want to take instruction. Maybe they don't need you that much. Maybe the training feels a little bit more like your hands are tied. And then like I had this experience where there was this middle school kid, not trying to be mean or anything like that, but he was a husky kid, and he was very uncoordinated, and he had best attitude about training. He's the most coachable kid that I've ever worked with, and he's such a good kid to be around. That I was like, this is what kind of fuels my fire, is working with somebody. I don't care who you are. If you're a good person and you want to learn and you want to work hard, like that's my drive. So whether it's coaching with a ball or coaching with weights, that's kind of what's important to me. And I feel that it's interesting that you might think that education and coaching, like with weights, are very different, but to me, it's basically the same thing. It's just in a different medium.
I say that, dude. And as you just said a number of things that made me light up, and I don't want to forget to touch on. But yeah, I say that all the time. It's like I'm still teaching. It's just a
Uh-huh.
subject matter that I actually care about. I hope,
Sure.
well, maybe some of my teacher friends will see this, but I didn't light up about history and English and history the way I
Sure.
light up about this stuff. It's still the
Yeah.
same thing. And there was certainly value in that experience, dude. Like going through teachings, particularly I think within special education, where I have to be able to meet people where they're at. There's a
Uh-huh.
wide breadth of ability levels and understanding levels. So being able to adjust communication and learn different tactics to reach people where they're at, especially when most of my customers did not want to be there. Did not want to be there. And
Yeah.
that's a nice part about strength and conditioning is most people
Sure.
that come through the door want to be there. Not everybody, but for some people it's just another activity or it's just another thing. But for the most part, you don't really have to sell them on it. Maybe you have to sell them on yourself a little bit and build that trust and build that connection. But they're there for a reason for the most part. I just jotting down notes. I got the, like every coach, the ADHD mind. So everything you said, I'm like, oh, I want to
Right.
touch on that. I want to touch on that. But you spoke, so referring to your own athletic background, the mental side is what held you back, you feel. And then also trying to do too much, like, oh, if I'm struggling now, then I must just need to turn things up in the gym. And I connect with that big time, dude. So again, so I played hockey up through college. That's where I found my ceiling. A little Division II school up in New Hampshire. Until then, I was always one of the better players on the team. And that's typically how it goes, right? In high school, if you make it to the college level, then you're with all the other guys who were the better players on their team. So I had never dealt with really adversity or like as far as like playing time goes or struggling within the game. And to that point too, most of my training was just strength training. I loved it. I loved it. I ate it up. And that at that stage, high school through preps, I did 1 year of prep school, a PG year, little school out in the middle of nowhere, New York. Actually, are you in upstate New York?
No, I'm in Virginia.
Oh, you're in Virginia. I thought it was, I'm sorry. I think I was talking to someone else recently that said they were in New York.
no.
But in any case, just weightlifting and playing my sport was enough to make me good. You know, I had enough skill to get by, and then just being stronger than everybody else and playing the sport often was enough to get me to that level. And then when I got to to college, and everybody else was good and everybody else was generally strong, and I wasn't seeing as much success as I had in the past, the only tool I had to fix it with was weightlifting. Like, okay, I must just need to do this thing more. That must be the answer. I just got to work harder at this, which, like, to all athletes, like, the work hard mentality like has to be there. But if you're using the same tool and you're getting the same outputs, like, it might be time to maybe consider a different tool or maybe a different avenue. And I just didn't have the wherewithal at that time to understand that. And it's surprising for people that don't know, most Division II and Division III colleges don't have stellar strength and conditioning. It's either, you know, one or two people, the staff. So they're like hugely overworked and understaffed and underpaid, frankly. And it's a lot of people's like foot in the door entry level position. And that's nothing against those people at all. Like, we all have to get started somewhere, but it's not like we have Alabama's coaching staff, you know, strength and conditioning staff at these D2, D3 colleges. So if you have, there's still kids I work with, who are in college now, who I'm doing their programs for online, because they don't have in-season program. They don't have, which is crazy to think. You would think these colleges would be squared away, but anyhow. So it's funny that you said that. And then the other part of that too, you mentioned the mental side of things. That was a big struggle for me too, because I hadn't experienced that diversity. So from a physicality side, I had one tool, and it was weightlifting. And then from a mental side, I didn't have the tools to deal with that adversity. So it was definitely a big struggle for me.
If I can speak to the mental side just a little bit, the issue for me is something that you don't even consider being a possibility. It was carrying too much. I know that sounds like what you say on a job interview to get the job, but it was actually to the point where I put so much pressure to get it on my own shoulders, because I was like, I need to make every pass perfect, every dribble perfect, every shot perfect. I need to like play without making mistakes and all that stuff. And then if I ever played pickup with friends, or I was like playing in practice and I didn't feel that pressure, I wouldn't care if I made a mistake. I would just care about having a positive impact. So you can miss a couple shots. That's fine. You got to shoot to score. You're not going to make all your shots. But then I would just take more shots, take more risks, play a little bit more risky and all that stuff. And so there's a book called The Inner Game of Tennis. And I wish I read it in college. I read it after I graduated when I was a soccer coach. And it talks about like the skill development side of sports, and particularly tennis, but it can apply to a bunch of different things. And the main kind of concept that they have is that you have an inner dialogue. It's not an inner monologue. You talk to yourself. Well, who is you and who is yourself? You are generally pretty mean to yourself. You might be like, oh, you fucking missed the shot. You're an idiot, you know? And it's like, all right, well, you is not helpful. And it takes too long for you to make decisions or to react. And you overthink things when you play. So let you sit in the back seat and let yourself take over. Let that be in the driver's seat. And yourself knows how to play really well, because it's all automatic. It's all based off feeling as opposed to thought. And so that was something that took a long time for me to realize. But if I just told myself, you know, do what you do best and don't think and just feel and play off instinct and all that stuff, that's when I played my very best. That's when all the skill work that I did would come through. And I felt like I was just a completely different player. And it's a little late for me to use that for my own, you know, soccer career and all that stuff. But I thought, at least I can teach this to some kids when I did high school coaching. You know, most of my business is Gen Pop. I have a home gym, and I work with athletes, but maybe 20% of my training is out of the home gym and 80% is mobile training clients out of their homes. And then maybe 80% of my training is with Gen Pop, mostly people 40s, 50s, 60s. But when I have the chance to work with a youth athlete, if they're willing to receive the knowledge, I'm happy to share like, hey, this is a mistake that I made. I hope you can avoid it. And it can just get you that little bit further in your career than what I had with mine.
Yeah, man, it's huge, and that's invaluable information, and information that I wish I had at the time, because to your point, like, I had the tools to be able the physical tools to be able to be successful on like
Mhm.
within the games. I didn't have the tools to be able to channel it and let it happen. My mind was getting in the way of letting things happen. And similar to you, like and to be fair, we'll be fair to both of us here. The collegiate environment is not necessarily conducive to letting that flow state and that mind,
Sure.
that mental state happening. It's very
Mhm.
much do or die, even within practice, where practice should be the place where like
Mhm.
we create an environment where mistakes are supposed to happen. We expect mistakes. We want to see mistakes
Mhm.
because we're trying things and you feel okay making mistakes.
Mhm.
But at that level, and in many other levels at this point too, if you make a mistake, you might not dress the next game. And if you make a
Mhm.
mistake within the game, you might not see the ice the next shift.
Mhm.
So it's challenging once you start going down
Mhm.
that road to break out of that and to free yourself up
Mhm.
to play freely and give yourself, reach your potential. So it's definitely a tough environment to foster that type of mindset and let the flow happen. There's just a lot of pressure. And it's funny, it's kind of like it's a vicious cycle because players who are good and have some success up front, they'll have a little more
Mhm.
leeway. And I know this from a coaching side too. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. It's kind of the nature of the meritocracy of it, where
Mhm.
you've seen how a player can do, you've seen what they can do. And okay,
Mhm.
if they make a mistake, that was just a bad shift or a bad instance. We're going to give them more leash. Where if you're closer to a bubble player, maybe you
Yeah.
don't have that early success up front, you got no leash. It's like you have to prove like guilty until proven innocent. So it's definitely a tough environment for that to happen, man. But yeah,
Can I add to
I
that?
always look back. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So it's interesting that you say that because I never really considered that. But you said meritocracy. Growing up, I believed in fairness so much and I believed in meritocracy so much and all these different things. And it took like maturing to realize that like fairness is a myth. Do you know what I mean? Like the world isn't fair. And you
Hmm.
hear it all the time, but then like when I was on the bench and there was a player ahead of me and they'd make mistakes and all that stuff, I'd be like, oh, I could do better. You have this mentality. It's a common thing for bench players to think, oh man, if I had a chance, I'd have done better.
Sure.
And I just thought
And the
if
parents and the parents of bench players too,
yeah, well, absolutely.
looking at
But
the
I was thinking
mistakes
to
of
myself,
everybody else.
yeah, I thought to myself, if I'm 1% better than the guy who's ahead of me, the coaches will realize and they'll give me the time I deserve. And this whole deserving mindset is essentially oh shoot, what's the word I'm looking for? Entitlement. And like it's not helpful.
Sure.
It doesn't do anything. And so eventually after my career, I was able to reflect and look back. If I told myself that I had to earn it as opposed to deserve it, there's a huge gap between earning and deserving. You might have to be three
Hmm.
times as good as the guy ahead of you to earn a chance. But there's no coach on the planet. If you scored 3 goals every single time you played, even off the bench or something like that, there's no coach that has such a strong political agenda against you with this coaching situation that he'll sit you on the bench forever. And so I know it sounds kind of foolish, but if I thought to myself, if I score every single time I get on the field, they're going to see something. They're going to play me. I might have to be better than the other guy by a significant margin. But the issue is I thought I just have to do 1% better and they'll notice. And they never did. And that's not a helpful
Hmm.
way to think about it. This whole deserving thing, entitlement thing, it was something that I struggled with. And I definitely want to teach the next generation, which I see a lot of struggling with when I worked in youth sports with their parents, how they would treat them. But it doesn't help anybody.
No, man. I mean, in any arena of life, like that type of comparison and kind of assuming a victim mentality, whether it's the coach is
Sure.
out to get me or I should have this, I should have that. Well, you don't. And maybe for right or for wrong, but it doesn't progress you forward. You're focusing
Yeah.
on that thing, which is out of
Mhm.
your control. And this is as cliche as it comes. But
Mhm.
focusing on the thing that's out of your control is not going to move you in any direction except right where you
Mhm.
are. And it is true, dude, whether it's fair or not. And I've experienced it, as being a coach, it's absolutely true that there might be times where the person right in front of you makes a little mistake and you're like, oh, I don't make that mistake. But the coach, like you said, the coach doesn't have an agenda other than what I think they should have
Yeah.
is what is best for the team. What's best for the
Mhm.
team? Yes, the team is comprised of a bunch of individuals and you
Mhm.
have a responsibility to each individual, but decisions that affect the team have
Mhm.
to be made in the best interest of the team. Does the coach
Mhm.
always make the right decision? No, but if that's what they're trying to do, that's the best they can do. Because we're all human. You're
Mhm.
going to make, wrong decisions sometimes. But to your point, if you're kind of a bubble player, you have to, I mean, for right or for wrong, you should have a shot at some point. But for right or for wrong, you have to prove consistently that you're definitely better than
Mhm.
that guy in front of you over time. And that's
Yeah,
just the way it is,
it's a great way of looking
unfortunately.
at it.
Yeah. So,
Um,
um,
I wanted to go back to you talking about hockey being more challenging than football. That's a hot take. It's definitely going to
Yeah,
ruffle some feathers. I'm
I
curious
like it.
because I think hockey is definitely underrated. From a physical aspect, there's so much speed and power involved. It's such a high intensity sport. Also, the collisions are at such high speeds. I think I saw in a like a hockey documentary or something like that, somebody said that the worst concussion they ever had was because they got hit in the stomach. But people don't realize that concussion isn't just getting hit in the head. Your brain can rattle around in your
Rattle.
skull, and that causes the bruising. And that's what happened. So he got hit in the stomach so hard because he was going full speed one way, the other guy's going full speed the other way. Hit him in the stomach. His brain rattled around. He said he had like a terrible concussion. There's also the hockey fighting thing, which people don't pay attention to, but that's a huge part of the culture. You got to be tough. And then the skill component, skating is hard enough on its own. Never mind putting a
Mhm.
racket or a stick in your hand and, moving around a little puck and all that stuff. So can you speak to why you think hockey, for example, is harder than football?
Yeah, I mean, so first, I'll play devil's advocate a little bit. The skating component, remove
Mhm,
it from the difficulty factor because for
mhm,
hockey players, skating is like walking across the ground. It's not,
mhm,
if you don't know how to skate, yes, skating is very difficult. But if you're a
mhm,
hockey player, you grew up on skates. So it's that does not factor into in my opinion, the difficulty factor. Because that's
mhm,
everybody's go-to is like, oh, you have to glide around on like a quarter-inch piece of steel and blah, blah, blah. Like, yes, to someone who's never done that before, that would
mhm.
be difficult. If you had to play basketball on a unicycle, that would be very difficult. But if you knew
Yeah.
how to ride a unicycle, then it wouldn't be so hard. Remove devil's advocate for the other side of the argument. Remove skating from the equation.
Mhm,
Why I think hockey is more difficult than football from a physicality standpoint, you can't wrap people up in hockey. You have to, so timing has to be more precise. If you really want to lay a big hit, which I was
mhm,
very good at, by the way, because I can stick hand. I can't. I don't have the hands, so I'm just a big, strong brute. Defenseman took up a lot of space, hit
mhm,
people. All brawn, no brains, maybe. So you have to, and I guess going back on my previous point, to hit well, like timing has to be there. It's happening at higher speeds. I think
mhm,
I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but the fastest person on skates on
mhm,
average is
mhm,
faster than the average football player. And I only know this because I had this debate at one point and I actually looked up the numbers. I think it's like mid high 20s for hockey, like maybe 26 miles an hour, and lower 20s for football, like
mhm,
22s, what you might see in a game speed, like very tippy top of it. So you're dealing with
mhm,
higher speeds. And to really hit somebody well, like you have to push kind of flying in the face of my first point, but coordinate yourself to push through a tiny blade and send that
mhm,
energy and coordinate that sequence and that
mhm,
timing right through your shoulder, right into the chest of the other person. So, from a physicality standpoint, I think it is more challenging. Whereas football, if you're just near the guy and you can get some arms around him and wrap him up, what's hard about that? You just grab him. Where I will say, and I will play at devil's advocate again, is that the guys in football now are so freakishly strong. And like the running backs are like, not tall guys, but they're like 240 pounds of like muscle. And like, that's okay. That's hard to tackle. I'll give you that. And also, and this is probably also because of the
yeah,
skating thing, you- there's guys that
yeah,
have very successful football careers that don't start playing football until they're like in high school. Like they go their entire like,
mhm,
youth, young career, or they become football players in college just because they're freak athletes. So I think I'm really trying to ruffle feathers now. If you have a great base of athleticism, you could probably go play football. And you hear stories about guys like LeBron James could have. I mean, maybe that's not a great example because he's a freak
mhm.
of all freaks. So there's more of I think, technical skill component to being a hockey player. And certainly there's skill positions within football where you have to be a bit of a technician and be a bit more skilled. But I think they're just a bunch of brutes running around on a grass field.
So I wanted to go off what you're talking about because it's just fun to compare sports. It doesn't mean that one's better than the other, one's harder than the other. It's just a fun thing to do. And we definitely do it with some bias. But um, for example, shoot, where was I going with this? Okay, so I had my jujitsu coaches on the podcast a few episodes ago, and I was talking about how I do Muay Thai, I do jujitsu, and then I do MMA, each thing once a week. And I'm not high level in any of them. It's just a fun discipline, but to start getting involved in. And I like all three in their own ways. Muay Thai, I find, is more challenging from a endurance aspect, more cardio in that sense, because it's just like repeat power. And we know that, like, the phosphagen system is, in theory, supposed to last, like, 10 seconds at your, like, highest intensities and all that stuff, and then you move to
Hmm.
glycolytic and oxidative systems and whatever. I'm not trying to get too sciencey, but, man, it feels like you're in phosphagen for 3 minutes at a time, all the time. It's just so exhausting. And like I played soccer and I felt like I had great cardio, and then I started hitting a heavy bag and pads and other people and sparring, and it just absolutely like knocks the air out of you. But then like jujitsu, for example, there's still gi and no gi, and there's differences to it. But I find that for me, it's much more muscular endurance than it is cardiovascular endurance. You can still gas out, but that tends to happen from just feeling like you're doing an isometric mid thigh pull for 3, 5 minutes at a time. And so just a different
Hmm.
thing. But I was talking to them about it too. To me, jujitsu is a much more complex sport in terms of the techniques and positions, and it's like chess. There's so many strategies. With Muay Thai, for example, you punch, you clinch, you have knees, elbows, and you have kicking. There's not much to it. It's a pretty simple thing. You just have to connect. There's a very high skill ceiling to it, right? It's a very technical sport, but it's not a complex sport. To me, jujitsu is very complex. And they said something interesting when they were comparing the two, and they have experience in multiple martial arts. But they said, like, you can see drunk people at a bar throwing, random strikes, and someone can get lucky and knock someone else out if they just catch someone in the right spot, even with no training. But there's never somebody that like ends up in a jujitsu competition with zero training that catches somebody in like a triangle. It's just such a
Sure.
complex, like maybe even unnatural thing. So it's fun to compare sports in that context. And then in the group chat I was telling you about that I have with some other strength coaches, we were trying to talk about what sports, if you just played like one sport, what would give you the greatest base of athleticism to go on and be successful in other sports. And we're talking about, maybe football, hockey, rugby, soccer, whatever. And so it's just fun to have these comparisons. Not that there's a right answer. I appreciate all the different sports. I like doing all the different things. And I think that's something that you do quite well too. And I actually want to start talking about your coaching philosophy and style. You certainly do have a traditional coach's style in the sense that you believe in speed and plyos and heavy lifting. But then you add the side that I think is lacking from a lot of coaches, which is the skill side. You have done more things with tennis balls than I've ever considered to do with tennis balls. I see you doing like handstands and like jumping around on playgrounds and like parks and all that and just getting creative. How did that become a thing for you?
That's a good question, man. I don't really know. I mean, a lot of what I do, if all of what I do, uh, is heavily influenced by others. So I
Mhm.
think like Yoakum's a great one for that type of stuff. This kind of small
Sure.
sided games and creative type stuff. And there's a few other guys that aren't on the top of my brain right now. So
Mhm.
certainly from within this field, everybody's taken from everybody else. And
Mhm.
if I take something directly from someone, I'll try to give them recognition.
Sure.
But with the amount that we take in, and I'm
Sure.
totally guilty of spending too much time on social media. Something might just be like in my head, and I don't even remember where it came from. And maybe it was something I just scrolled by. So that's certainly a source. I think the other thing too is it's just fun for me, dude. Like I spend a lot of time in the gym, coaching, but
Mhm.
also just extra time in there. Like when I go to train myself, I'll take the first, it depends, depends on the type of day it is, the first 10 to maybe it bleeds into 20 minutes of just kind of messing around. And obviously, if I have to get down to business and it's a certain type of day and I have time constraints, then I'll get to it. But some days and I think we all experience this too. Some days I don't feel like I walk in the door and I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go like max effort. So sometimes I need to find something that's more maybe technically challenging or
Mhm.
mentally stimulating than it
Mhm.
is physically intense. So I think that
Mhm.
that's where a lot of tennis ball work goes from. Because I mean, who doesn't love to like play with a ball? Like when I was a little kid, me and my brother used to just rip tennis balls off the top of my parents' house and let it come down. And like, so playing with the tennis ball, bouncing it, getting creative with how you do it. And then before you know it, you're locked in, like your nervous system switched
Mhm.
on. A lot
Mhm.
of these kids are coming from school. I'm coming, if I'm training myself, I'm coming from work or from being on the
Mhm.
computer. So I think injecting a little bit of stimulation from that perspective where
Mhm.
you don't have to like go to red line right away. And then now I've got to the point where I can organize it and slowly ramp it up. So by the time we're at the end of whatever the activity is, the tennis ball,
Mhm.
the game, the movement challenge, all of a sudden you look down and your heart rate's at, a buck 35 and you're feeling warm and you're ready to go. So it just
Mhm.
segues nicely into the session. I think it's more fun than just a traditional dynamic warm up.
Mhm.
Um, Not that we don't take time, sometimes we just need to sit down and do some, soft tissue work and stretch a
Mhm.
little bit. But if we're feeling good, dude, I'd much rather like mess around and play a game and warm up that way and get engaged that way. And
Mhm.
it almost always leads to a more engaged session and a better
Mhm.
session overall. So I forget what the original question is, but I hope I answered it.
Yeah, I was just asking how you got into that style of training. I just wanted to compliment it because we talked a little bit before starting this podcast. One of the things I want to talk about was long-term athletic development, which is a fancy term that gets thrown around a
Mhm.
lot. And there's so many like studies about multi-sport athletes will have such a wide base that they can hit those high peaks. And you were talking about football players that come from other sports just because they're so athletic. And so I
Mhm.
find that I think the study said elementary school and middle school, like up until you hit middle school, you should play about 3 or 4 sports. And then once you're middle school, about 2 to 3, and then high school 1 to 2. And then when you go college or pro, you can then single down and specialize in one sport, which is shaped like a pyramid. But then the other
Mhm.
benefits there too are you can take movement solutions that you had from one sport and apply it to another sport. You can have different types of physical advantages from one sport to another sport. I had a teammate in college who did cycling a lot and he never got tired. His legs were strong and he's just able to do those hard runs from the first minute to the 90th minute. My wife was an All American in college in soccer, and she was the best player I've ever seen at hitting the ball, at timing the ball in the air because she played basketball. So she just always met the ball at the highest point that she could with her jump. Her final game in college, I don't know if you know like what statistics look like for headers, but a defender might, and she wasn't even a defender, she just played defender in that one game. A defender might have 10 headers to go up against in a game. They might win 6 or 7. She won 16 for 16 in her final game, which is like just unreal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that came from a
Yeah.
basketball background. I think one of the things that I like about your style is that, and I mentioned I don't like youth sports culture today. There's so much money involved in playing sports, and now it's year round. There's almost no off season, and coaches don't like you playing other sports. And there's too much pressure on these kids, and they have burnout physically and mentally. They have overuse injuries at such a young age. 12-year-olds with baseball with terrible shoulders or something like that, for example, because they're just they go to school, then they go to their pitching coach for hours and then they lift and then they have weekend tournaments every single weekend and all that stuff. I think what you do is give people multi-sport without giving them multi-sport because you just give them a space to express different movement solutions and skills. And you give them the play that they're missing too in the environments that should be playful. When I coached, uh, 9-year-old kids, I saw other coaches for other teams screaming at these kids at the top of their lungs, "You're not doing your job." Like the kid doesn't know what a job is. He's 9. This is his first year kicking a ball. Let him have fun with his friends. Like you're going to make him hate all sports forever. So I think, I don't know where this shift happened, but I think youth sports are it's not all bad, but man, it just ruined what I think it should be about. Kids don't play anymore. So if they can go to your gym and play around a little bit, or they can express different movements skills, physical adaptations are great. It's great to be jacked. It's great to be fit. Strength and conditioning works for that. But if you have, like you're talking about in hockey, if you're jacked and you don't know timing and you can't skate and you can't apply the right hit the right way at the right time, what's the point?
Yeah, man. And man, I mean, you made some points, and we could have a whole nother podcast on
Sure.
just the state of youth sports alone. So I don't even know where to start with that. But you hit the nail on the head, dude. And it's largely like I think it's a business model. It's like the capitalism of youth sports, and there just becomes this pressure. So it's like not like there's like an evil Dr. Evil in his lair, like twiddling his fingers in his mustache, like I'm trying to destroy youth sports. But because of the advent of the club models and how
Mhm.
there's now the ability to play 12 months out of the year, well,
Mhm.
if Johnny's going to do it, then I need my kid to do it too, because I don't want
Mhm.
my kid to fall behind Johnny.
Mhm.
But to your point, they're 9-year olds. They're like, there's time to get good. And if your kid's going to be good, I'm very much of the opinion like the people who are going to go to the high levels and make a career out of athletics, they're going to do it regardless of,
Mhm.
obviously there's a lot of things that need to happen along the way, but they have
Mhm.
the genetics, they have the things within them that are going to allow them to do that. And,
Mhm.
there's a fair bit of luck. They need to meet the right people and be in the right environments and make the right decisions to make that happen.
Mhm.
But trying to force it on a 9-year-old kid is bonkers. Like the first and foremost, let's develop a good relationship with the sport, with training, with other people. And I think a big part of that is providing diversity, physical diversity, social diversity, not being with the same group of kids every season for the whole
Mhm.
season for your whole life, get into some different environments. So there's definitely some social and psychological aspects to it. And then from a physical standpoint too, to your point, like there's overuse injuries with middle school kids and high school kids.
Insane.
What
Insane.
what are we doing? Like
Mhm.
they can take a few months off and their chances of going pro aren't going to be hurt.
Sure.
play a different sport. They don't have,
Sure.
and the other thing too is like, you don't have to get totally away from your sport. You can still get touches. If you're a hockey player, have an off season. You can still rip shots in the driveway a couple days a week and keep that timing and keep that touch, but play a different sport, man, and get some, they just get entrenched in these patterns, movement patterns, thinking patterns. So if we can, to bring it back to the gym, introduce some different patterns, from a physical standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, and break them out of these things that they're just entrenched in, I think that's, that's a win-win. So yeah, man, it seems like a necessary thing now that we need to provide. There's just not that, also not, I'm going to sound like an old man, but I feel like there's not that natural tendency to go outside and play either. And not because, maybe this is a different take, not just because they're like inside on their phones, but because they're too busy going to the sport again. They're like, their whole life is ruled by that school and sport. Like, so these kids are busy and they become really good at their sport, but physical development is lacking and diversity is lacking. And I think more often than not, it just leads to a burnout. And oftentimes the way I see it, and, occasionally we get the person that goes and play college, and then very occasionally we get the person that actually makes a career or makes some money playing the sport. But for the most part, this athletic journey is going to end at high school. And now there's a bunch of club sports in college, so that's great. So maybe we get to go play in college too, or we get to play NCAA. But athletics ends at a certain point, and if they're a one-trick pony, now what do I do? Because everything I've done to this point has been pouring into that bucket. So now what do I don't have a plan B. Where's my identity? My identity is gone, and it can be tough. And then there's this like hangover period for these athletes that can last a number of years. And I feel like I felt it probably a little bit myself. Okay, I'm not Steve the hockey player anymore. Like, who the hell am I? Because I haven't been thinking about shit else. So I don't know, there's no plan B, that I don't know what I'm supposed to do with myself now.
Can I speak
So
to
I
that
know,
a little bit?
I know. Yeah, I know. I just went on a tangent. But yeah,
No,
go
that's
ahead.
great. I appreciate that point because that's not discussed enough is the, identity, uh, being so tied into the activity that you do, and so my wife is a therapist, and we talked about that too, how she works with various populations. She probably, prefers working with, military personnel with PTSD, for example, and, like, trauma responses, but then she
Mhm.
also works with high school athletes and teenagers with depression, anxiety, all these different things, and one of the things for
Right.
athletes in particular is tying your self-worth to your performances or your identity to your activity, and not realizing that there's a whole person outside of hockey or, for me, soccer, for example, and so I played 3 years in college, I graduated in 3 years, and then I coached for a bit and tried playing, rec just to still keep it up for a bit, and then I maybe had a few years, the early COVID years where I wasn't playing any sports. I was just lifting and I was training in the basement just because I didn't know what else to do. Like I had a brick, like a concrete wall and a soccer ball, and I still do my drills that I did my whole life without even like playing in a league. There was no purpose to other than like I had nothing else to do. And it just felt such a natural, almost like therapeutic thing for me. And so the gym to me is not, I'm not so passionate about like just lifting. For me, it was always to help with sports performance. It was a means to an end. It wasn't just like I love the feeling of knurling or the cold steel in the morning. Like some people are into that. It's cool. I like it. I'm not obsessed with it. Sports, I would be more obsessed
I
with.
might be one of those guys.
Yeah. So, I mean, I like it, but, like, it was always a means to an end. So that's why I started this, like, combat sports journey is because it allows me to have a reason to train, and I also
Mhm.
get to learn training from a different perspective because now I have, different ways that I'm using the energy systems, different injury risks, different movement strategies altogether. I know they say soccer players are on the ground all the time rolling around, but it doesn't translate to jujitsu very well. That's a pretty unique skill on its own. So there's definitely that identity aspect, and I find that training with a purpose allows me to train with intent. But if it's training just to train, it was never the most enjoyable thing to me. I also wanted to go back a little bit to 2 other topics, if that's okay, because I know I'm rambling a little bit. But we were
No,
talking
no,
about
no,
youth
it's all
sport.
good.
So the youth sports culture thing, the 2 moments that stood out to me that made me not wanna coach, like, youth sports ever again, one of them was I have to do like, my club required to do player evaluations, like a meeting with the player, a progress plan, like a report card for a player, which is crazy, at the beginning, middle, and end of each season, and we have 3 seasons. And one of these, like, progress meetings I have, this one kid was brand new to the sport, but he was a great kid. He had a track background and a baseball background, and he actually had, like, a diverse, like, movement skills, so I actually thought, "Man, if I can just teach this kid this skill, he has a high ceiling compared to other kids, that's all they've ever done." And his dad was such a tough guy, like, I like toughness, but there was no other side to it. It was almost like almost abusive. We were doing the meeting and he was saying that I was being too soft on his kid during this like, report card sort of like meeting. And he said, he's like, you know how much money I spend every season for you to play? I spend this money. We have money, but these families don't have as much money as we have. When you're playing and you're playing terribly, you're stealing money from the pockets of these families. Do you understand that? And I was like, it was such a despicable thing to say to a 9-year-old.
You didn't tell. I don't know if you buried the lead there. I don't know if you said he was 9 off the rip. That's yeah, that's bonkers. What are we doing?
It's just crazy. And then the other one was, in the winter. Do you know what futsal is?
No, I don't.
It's soccer on a basketball court. It's 5 and you have the little goals. And
Okay,
so
okay. I feel like I've seen maybe videos of it.
so I love it. I think it's great, and it's a great kind of, like, adjacent to soccer thing. It's very similar, but it just breaks it up a bit. So the kids would play the fall and spring were their main seasons. The summer, they would have camps, and then in the winter, they would do futsal. But that winter futsal season was all scrimmages. It didn't count for anything. There's
Yeah,
no promotion, relegation, there's no trophies, nothing. You just let the kids play. And it's great because it's so fast paced and there's so few players that players get touches on the ball way more than they would on an open field. Again, these kids are 9 years old. There was one dad who was sitting on the sidelines and he was trying to like joystick the kids like a video game, screaming at the top of his
mhm,
lungs, pass, shoot, this, that, the other. The kids were playing like it was hot potato because they're so scared to get yelled at by this dad.
yeah,
At halftime, I went over to the dad and my blood is boiling. And in front of all the other parents, this guy's a Marine, by the way, and he just came back from a tour. Do you know what I mean? So it feels weird yelling at like active military
sure.
personnel and all that stuff. But I was like,
Yeah,
cut
yeah,
it
yeah,
out.
yeah.
Like, I'm the coach. You're not. You're the parent. You support. If you have nothing positive to say, I don't want to hear a word from you. And then he came up to me after the game and he's like, I know you like this hippy dippy, like everybody has fun, but I care about winning and this, that, the other. I'm like, dude, I care about winning too, but you just don't understand. Like, what you're doing is so messed up. These kids are 9 years old and they're not going to develop it. They're scared to play and they're scared to play because you're screaming at them like a drill sergeant.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
You care
crazy.
about winning, but like you have the players, there's pee running down their legs when they touch the ball because they're too afraid to do anything. Like,
My
yeah,
gosh.
like
Yeah, it's terrible.
it's not. I can't stand that. I guess we're in the millennial generation of coaches, right?
Mhm.
So compared to previous generations and coaches that coached me, you could say that I'm a soft coach because
Sure.
if you just by looking at the two, I'm not screaming at the kids all the time.
Mhm.
And when I was certainly not in the gym, I'm not screaming at the kids. When I was coaching hockey, maybe I get a little bit more animated at times. And certainly when I was a young coach and
Mhm.
only had I was just parroting what I had seen previously and
Sure.
hadn't found my own coaching voice. Yeah, I would try to be a tough guy when I was a younger coach. But let's like look at the outcomes just because you're not screaming and yelling does not indicate that you don't care about winning. You just have found a different way to elicit what you want out of the players. It doesn't have to be with a
Right.
hammer all the time. If you
Mhm.
have the communication skills, or you can just set the environment up for success to happen, for exploration to happen, for
Mhm.
improvement to happen, and you can just sit back and let it happen, well, what's wrong with that? You have to
Mhm.
force it and scream it into existence, and like only
Mhm.
the kids who aren't afraid enough rise to the top, or aren't too
Mhm.
afraid to succeed rise to the top. Like, what are we doing? Like, let's
That's the thing,
if
yeah.
we can
Have you seen
rise.
the movie,
Go ahead.
have you seen the movie Whiplash? It's with, like, the jazz drummer.
I know of it. I know I can picture the scene where he's like smacking the kid in the
Yeah, yeah,
head
yeah.
because he's
Yeah.
like lagging or something. But yeah,
But that's what people think that, like, good coaching is as long as there's, like, this survivorship bias, if someone can survive, like, the worst training, the worst abuse ever, then they're gonna make it to the top. But maybe you can actually build more people than you can by trying to break them down and see who survives. So I don't like that style of coaching. But like you
yeah,
said, I wasn't as, like, soft to coach as people would think, especially with the high schoolers. With the kids, I was a little bit nicer. My thing was respect and effort. If you had those things, we're good, right? If you miss a shot, I don't care. If you had like the right intention, or you miss a shot and you track back and you defend, you're giving your best effort, or you're being respectful to your teammates and your opponents, we're good. If you didn't have that, I would lay into a kid. And I mean, there's one kid who,
sure.
in my first coaching job, do you know what nutmegging somebody is in soccer? It's where you like dribble through someone's
Oh
legs. It's
yeah,
the most embarrassing thing.
yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
nutmegs a kid, the opponent falls to the ground, and he turns and looks at me and starts making fun of the kid. And I subbed him off immediately, and I just tore into him in front of everybody. I'm like, "You don't ever treat opponents like that." I'm fine with, like, my first ever game that I coached, we won 13-0. So it's not like I feel sorry for the opponents, but you should treat them with respect.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
So
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
definitely had the balance, but as long as the kids were respectful and working hard, I would rather pull them aside and actually coach the game. I hated seeing these complex drills and people just screaming effort, effort, effort. I'd rather teach people, what did you try to do? Make it collaborative. What did you try to achieve? They explain their thought process. I say, okay, maybe you could have done this. Maybe you could have done that. Show me in the next opportunity. And then my favorite thing in
Sure.
coaching is when someone came up with a solution that I hadn't seen. It's not my game. It's their game. I'll give them the accountability. I give them the
Yeah,
space to
man.
do it. So I think there definitely is a balance between soft coaching where there's no accountability, which I absolutely believe in accountability, but it's not beat the kids down as much as you can and see who survives. I don't like that style either.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It's not like it can't be like a hippie drum circle where we're all
Sure.
like everything's cool, man, all the time,
Yeah.
anything goes. Like, no, there's a way you carry yourself, there's
Mhm.
expectations, there's a moral code of the team and things that we
Mhm.
expect that, as a coach you put in place, you exemplify, you make very clear. And those should be things that hopefully equal the things you want, the outcomes you want.
Mhm.
But why can't like as far as how to get effort or get
Mhm.
improvement out of the kids, that can look a lot of different ways. If I can set up a game or like, a small sided game, and I was
Mhm.
doing this when I was a hockey coach before I even was into like, dove
Mhm.
into constraint based learning or constraint based training or differential learning, all that stuff. I was kind
Mhm.
of doing it before I knew the names or the labels of the things. But
Mhm.
you can get a kid to go pretty hard if
Mhm.
they're having fun in a competitive drill. Like if there's that's when you're going to see
Mhm.
kids go hard. So I could scream at a kid and make them afraid and, again, pee running down their leg as they skate fast across the ice. Sure, I could get you to go fast doing that. I could also get you to go fast by like putting you in a race or putting you in a timed drill where you're up against the
Mhm.
clock. But in the latter of those two scenarios, you don't feel the fear and you don't have. So now we're back to the mindset part of things. You're not constrained by fear and afraid to make a
Mhm.
mistake. You're going hard because it's fun and you want to beat your friend. And there's something you're bought in, you're enthusiastic, you care about what you're doing. So if we think about ourselves in any arena of life, if I genuinely care about the thing I do it and I'm bought in, I'm invested in the thing, I'm going to do it with some enthusiasm. I'm probably going to do it often and I'm going to do it with some effort. So if I had, the carrot or the stick, I'd much rather have the carrot if I can provide carrots for the kids and have it be something they want to do and that's why they're putting effort into it and doing it with enthusiasm, then
Mhm.
that's just my style. That's what I'm going to opt to do. And
Mhm.
again, that doesn't mean that, it's a free for all the time and they can, act like idiots or misrepresent the team or themselves or disrespect their other teams, their standards, but we don't have to be angry drill sergeants to
Sure.
get what we want.
So in the context of Muay Thai, for example, when you think of like boxing training, you kind of picture like people just clubbing each other's heads off and trying to kill each other and all that. When you hear about Muay Thai, what they say they try to achieve, at least in Thailand, is you go hard on the pads and hard on the bag, but then in sparring, it's supposed to be playful. You should be able to like talk to your friends or joke or laugh around. That does not happen when you're trying to take someone's head off all the time. When you're prepping for a fight, they will do those hard sparring rounds. But in general, if you want to like develop the skill, the distance, the angle, the timing, the movement, the defensive aspects, the feints, all these different elements. You can't do that when someone's trying to kill you. And so, like, well, I have like this MMA class that I go to, and we'll do sparring sometimes. And I know which partners I'd rather work with if I'm trying to develop, and which ones I need to like survive against. And there's this one kid. I feel bad for this story, but I've told it before. He's maybe 18 years old and all that stuff. I'm 28, so I feel mean beating up on a kid. But he was trying to take my head off the entire time. And I felt that I was more competent than him, so I wasn't, like, threatened, I wasn't scared or anything like that. So I would just lay, like, some light punches, let him feel that I'm going 60, 70%, and then he's throwing overhand rights and Superman punches at my head 100 miles an hour, and I'm just like, "What the heck?" Do you know what I mean? So I wanted to teach him a lesson, and Muay Thai, you can go low, you
You
can go
got
middle,
it.
you can go high, right? I just took his leg off, do you know what I mean? I was like, I
Yeah.
gotta teach him a lesson." But but I was like, "I can
Chop the
hit him
tree
in the."
down.
Yeah, I was like, "I can hit him in the liver, and that's really mean, he's gonna throw up, I feel bad. I can hit him in the face, give him a concussion or knock him out or bloody nose. I don't wanna do that either. The nicest thing I can do to this kid, where I still teach him a lesson, is to take the kid's leg off."
Try to break his
Just
leg,
shot
yeah.
at his. Oh gosh, I feel bad about it, but I think he learned his lesson that, like, he was going too tense, and you're not able to learn. But then again, I'm not trying to be super hippy dippy. There are times where you need hard sparring rounds. And it's the same thing with competition training and all that stuff. There were times where I would like purposely put pressure on kids to see how they do because a game, if it's 2-2 against your rival and it's 10 minutes left in the game and you want to win and the kids care that much, you got to put some pressure on them. But then otherwise, if you want someone to develop like their creativity on the ball or something like that, you have to give them an environment where it's safe to do so.
Yeah, man, absolutely, and I think you can do that too. You can put pressure on, you can put them in high pressure situations, and that's fine. But I think the manner that you react to whatever they do, however it goes, is going to dictate what happens next or how they're able to progress moving forward. Put a kid in a high pressure situation and it doesn't go well, and we react by freaking out and shaming, probably going to be
Mhm.
less apt to try or to go outside of what we feel
Sure.
comfortable doing the next time I'm in a high pressure situation. Versus, okay, high pressure situation, made a mistake, shit the bed, something went wrong. Well, let's have a conversation afterwards. Why did it go wrong? What do you think happened? Let's evaluate what happened rather than react with screaming. He already feels bad. He fucked up.
Yeah.
Like that part is done. The shame is felt. We don't need to pile on the shame sandwich here.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's where a lot of guys will get it wrong, in my opinion. So it's not that we can't have hard coaching or hard situations, but the reaction, the aftermath, the assessment afterwards, I think is what's going to dictate how are we going to do next time? How are we going to go about this and navigate this the next time we get a chance? Um,
So I wanted to go
um,
back quite a bit of a ways, but you're talking about like the multiple sports when we're talking about long-term athletic development and all that stuff. You have the benefit of having played a lot of sports that are actually quite similar, at least in terms of a rotational aspect. Hockey,
mhm.
baseball, cross even. I see you doing the Kaiser. You're just ripping it,
Yeah,
and you're putting up
yeah,
some
yeah, yeah,
crazy
yeah,
numbers on that.
yeah.
I've seen
Were
that
they
where
crazy? I
some
don't know.
sports
I
tend
have
to
no point of reference.
Sure, but I mean, so, like, you see
Ugh.
that some sports correlate to others better, right? Like, badminton won't go the best or snowboarding, right? But, like, wrestling to jujitsu,
Mhm,
incredible, great correlation, right? You could
mhm.
say baseball to golf is close enough, it's at least better than it would be ping pong to golf. So, what I was gonna say is, do you think that that has helped you like, do you play golf, for example?
Yeah, I actually had a big golf obsession for a little while that I didn't mention. So after I probably started halfway through college, I worked at a golf course. That was my first
Okay.
job. I worked at a local country club, Plymouth Country Club. Shout out Donald Ross course, 1910 something. It's an old golf course. So I
Oh,
worked there from I want to say the summer of my freshman year in high
mhm,
school plus 11 years. So well after college. I worked there for a long time. And
mhm,
about halfway through my time there, I started actually you could golf for free if you were I was on the grounds crew, so we cut the grass and did all the grunt work and all that stuff. So you could go for free. So I at a certain point I started taking advantage of that, dude, and I got obsessed. So I would
uh-huh,
play like my days were these were the salad days. These was like some of the one of the best periods of my life. I would
uh,
work at the golf course from like 6 a.m. to 2 o'clock, get out, go to the gym and smash some weights, then come
uh-huh,
back to the golf course and I would golf from like, 4:30 until the sun went down. It was
mhm.
fantastic. So anyways, all that to say, yes, I have a background in golf.
The main reason why I was asking if you golfed is because with all the rotational sports you've done, do you think that it had any translation to your ability to swing a club the first time? I know it's not the exact technique, but do you think as long as you connected with the ball, you're able to hit bombs pretty well compared to the average person who may not have had any rotational experience?
100%, 100%. Maybe not hit bombs every single time, but just
Uh-huh,
coordinating because there's a lot of things happening with rotation, right? Especially when we're using an
uh-huh,
external implement, whether it's a baseball bat or a
uh-huh,
golf club or a field hockey stick. So I can always tell if somebody swings a golf club for the first time or a hockey or a bat. You can
uh-huh,
generally tell with your coaching eye, like, oh, you either have played a sport that involves some element of rotation with an external implement or you certainly have not because I think there's so many variables to it and so many
uh-huh,
joints involved and degrees of freedom where things can go wrong or go right. So just that sequencing and that
uh-huh,
flow I think can definitely translate from one thing to the next. And I think there's a coordination aspect too with using an external implement, so like a hand-eye
uh-huh,
coordination aspect to it too. There tends to be like hockey players, there tends to be a lot of lacrosse players that also play hockey, and if someone
uh-huh,
is a hockey player, they usually can pick up lacrosse pretty quickly
mhm,
from a hand-eye coordination standpoint and a throwing standpoint. Not the other way around just because of the skating element, but typically you'll see a lot of crossover between hockey and lacrosse.
mhm.
So yeah, absolutely. If you have any background in rotation, I think you might not do it perfectly. Golf's a hard sport, but you can at
Sure.
least you can at least, let it rip pretty good and then clean up the little details along the way.
The reason why I bring that up is because, like, one of my buddies played baseball, and when we go to Topgolf, he has no golf experience. He'll rip just as hard every single time. He'll scuff the ball, slice 3, hook 3, and then out of 10, and then he might hit like 3 or 4 that hit the back net from the ground floor every single time with like 0 golf
Yeah.
training. Or you'll see like some MLB guy that doesn't golf at all go to top golf from the bottom and hit it over the net. You know what I mean? And so I think there's something that people need to understand is that when they talk about sport specific, I work with a lot of golfers. There's a country club that's near like my parents' house, which is where I originally started my business. So I'm located in this county where I do a lot of my mobile training. A lot of my clients are golfers, and they originally would ask, "Can we do some golf specific stuff?" Because that's what you see sold. They'll say, "Can I do a golf specific
Hmm.
rotation exercise, a golf specific mobility exercise?" And it's like, "Oh shoot, yeah, I forgot that that cable rotation is only for golf and not for baseball, not for hockey, not for anything else." Or that this 90-90 where it gives some hip internal and external rotation will only apply to somebody in this sport, but not in another athletic context. So that was one of my big gripes early on is the idea of sport specific. You work with a lot of different sports. You can probably speak to this. I find good training is 80 to 90% the same thing. And the only considerations you really need to take would be maybe some specific skill aspects, but mostly high areas of injury. You just want to focus on that to keep
Hmm.
them safe. And maybe the conditioning demands that might be different because hockey conditioning is going to be different than soccer conditioning. Outside of
Hmm.
that, there's not a basketball squat versus a football squat versus a baseball squat. They're all squats. And people should be squatting, hinging, pushing, pulling, doing some core exercises, some power, all these different things. But that's one of the things I tried to tell people early on. And it doesn't sell as well. They said if I said hashtag golf specific, they'd pay me double for the session, you know?
Yeah, man. And I'm very much in line with everything that you just said. I think,
Mhm.
with the exception of, as you said, maybe some training specific energy systems for whatever their sport is in preparation for that, and maybe some high traffic areas
Mhm.
where we maybe want to just make sure that they're a little bit
Mhm.
more robust. Like for a hockey player, I might think a little bit more about the groin, maybe a little bit more about the hip flexor, just because there's high instances of injuries with that.
Mhm.
With that being said, I want everybody's body to be as robust as possible in all spots. So it's going to look, you said 80. I would even say maybe even 80 to 90% very, very similar
Mhm.
across the board. And I'm very much in the school of let the sport train the sport. Like and especially to
Sure.
our earlier discussion, they're getting so many touches with their sport. It's like, brother,
Mhm.
you already swung a golf club 1,000 times this week. Why am
Mhm.
I going to have you come in the gym and do some more rotation? Like that bucket's pretty full. And the forces that
Sure.
you're experiencing when you're doing that at such a high velocity, at such a high frequency, why do we need to pour more gasoline onto that fire? Like maybe we can shore up
Mhm.
some areas, other areas, maybe break out of that
Mhm.
pattern a little bit, make sure you're just a little bit more well-rounded and
Mhm.
robust. And what was the last point you made there I wanted to speak to too?
Mm.
Oh, I forget. Oh, it was a good one too.
If
But
you
I'm right
remember,
in
let me
line with
know.
you on that stuff.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah,
another
I
thing that
will.
took me a
Might come
while
back
to
to me.
learn early on was, that if someone's preparing for a sport, you have to prepare them specifically for the demands of the sport, but if they're in season and they're getting a lot of the activity, you don't have to double down on that and overfill the bucket like you're talking about. So an example is I have a slide board in the corner there. I think
I
it's great.
remember.
For somebody who you remember? Okay, so for someone who, like a soccer player, they might do a lot of running. I don't need to give them tempo runs or shuttles for their conditioning. They're already doing that, right? But a slide board might be a good opportunity to lengthen the groin or to work on like some lateral change of direction, for example. A hockey player doesn't necessarily need to be on a slide board because they're already in that position all the time. They might even benefit from doing tempo runs, for example, where they can actually get a taller posture and lengthen the hip flexor a little bit more. So it's weird how when is it appropriate to give people what they need and when is it appropriate to give them the opposite? They have too much of it, you give them what they're not getting. And I think that was a really difficult shift for me to understand in the beginning because I thought a soccer player has to do it something that looks like soccer all the time and a hockey player needs something that looks like hockey all the time, for example. But it's actually almost the inverse, especially in season.
Mhm, mhm. And I think that was a hard thing for me to learn, and probably most coaches initially too, is
Mhm,
the whole sport specific thing and making things look like the sport in the gym, and then, what you end up
mhm,
with is just a bastardized version or a worse version of what they're just
mhm,
getting from the sport. So, I used to do when I was early in the gym, a, uh a hockey group, which fine, but I don't think that's wrong to have a group of just one type of athlete and say, I work with
mhm,
this type of player.
mhm,
Maybe you have a background in that sport. Maybe you understand the nuances of the sport. Maybe you just like working with that. And that's good for business. I know if I'm a hockey player, this is where the hockey players go. That's fine. But billing the training as like, oh, this is,
mhm,
hockey specific training, that's where now I have an issue with that. So I used to have a hockey that would come in and we would use the slide boards and we would do all these
mhm,
different things, slide boards with med balls, resisted
mhm,
slide boards, stuff that's not like bad stuff. Maybe I might do it for, I don't know, a warm up nowadays or just like because it's kind of fun and a fun skill. But these kids are skating on the ice. Like I'm not going to do better than the ice when
Mhm.
it as it pertains to hockey movements and hockey patterns. But here I am in the gym and I didn't have a nefarious agenda. I thought this is okay, I'm training hockey players. We're doing hockey training.
Mhm.
So I could get into the specifics of some of the junk that we did. And, we got a good workout in and we moved and it was a good group of kids and we did good work. So I don't want to say it wasn't valuable,
Mhm.
but I certainly would do it much, much different nowadays. And that's the
Mhm.
point that you made, kind of segueing into the point that I remembered. You kind of touched on marketing. And I think that's the bigger issue overall. So I think that's the crux of the issue when it comes to, and maybe some coaches actually believe
Mhm.
in the sports specific lane. I certainly did when I started off and didn't know any better. But I think moreover, these guys that have tenure in the industry, like I've got to believe it's motivated by marketing. Because
Mhm.
yes, it is much easier to sell hockey specific training. Look at these hockey specific drills that we do. And
Mhm.
why would parents know any better? You see the drills like, oh,
Mhm.
that looks like he's doing something a hockey player. He's moving like a hockey player in the gym. That must
Mhm.
be specialized. That's what my kid needs to do because he's a hockey player. When again, in reality, these bastardized movements just become a watered down version of what they're already doing. So they're accumulating, if they're in a positive environment and they're with good people, like sure there's value to it. From a physiological and development standpoint, they're just wasting their time. They're spending extra time accumulating more fatigue and junk volume in the gym. And these people are already hard pressed for time because they're going from
Mhm.
sport to sport to sport to sport and all these things. And it's really not moving the needle for them, but it's easy to sell. It's easy to sell from a visual standpoint on social media. You put out drills that look different or look like the
Mhm.
sport, people's, perk up. You put out a video of a back squat or a bench press. Well, we've all seen that a million times. That's just weightlifting stuff. When in reality, very well now, is if the mostly they're worried about sports specific stuff when homeboy can't even do a chin up or can't even
Sure.
do, squat their body weight. So like there's so
Mhm.
much room for just general physical development that's going to take them so far. And again, they're playing their sport 12 months a year. They're getting the skill
Mhm.
work. They're getting enough of their sport. They're
Mhm.
getting too much of their sport. So we don't need to
Mhm.
pour more sport like movements and sport like patterns on top of that fire in the gym.
To play I completely agree with that, but then to play devil's advocate to that, one of the things that you're supposed to learn, you learned in the CSCS textbook for sure, is the law of specificity.
Mhm.
I've seen people go the opposite direction so far that it's like completely illogical. So there's this one guy who wanted me to train out of his gym and then like pay rent or something like that. It's a weird deal that he's trying to do. And he just said, "Hey, do you want to watch one of my sessions? See if you're interested in working out of this gym." I said, "Sure." It's just an hour. Who cares? And a kid asked him, he's like, "How do I jump higher?" And he's like, "Get your squat, bench, deadlift, and chin up, and you'll be a better jumper." And it's like squat and deadlifts, maybe. I don't know how being like able to bench 405 and do chin ups with 100 pounds added is going to make you necessarily a better jumper. The correlation is so minimal. If you want to be better at jumping, you have to jump. If you want to be better at sprinting, you have to sprint. If you want to get stronger, lift heavy. That's where a lot of specificity matters. But does it mean you have to squat with a bamboo bar and a Bosu ball because it looks fancy and you say it's specific to this? Are you ever going to actually squat on ice to make it more specific? Like that is so dangerous. So there's that sweet spot of specificity. And I hate to see some people be so general that they don't even understand that if I need to work on my conditioning, I should probably do some conditioning. If I want to get stronger, I should do some strength work. But it's not that complicated. I think there's that like graph, the bell curve graph, where it shows like
Mhm.
people do smart things when they're dumb. They learn a little bit, they do dumb shit, and they think they're the smartest they're ever going to be. And they go back to things they originally did, but like they came full circle and have a better understanding. And even when I was misguided early on with my training, I at least understood jump to jump fast, jump higher, sprint to run faster, like all these different things. I at least understood that, and I wasn't thinking, "Oh, my chin up is gonna help my jump." It's not. It's gonna help rock climbing, maybe. I'll be better if I can do chin ups, but it's not gonna help my
Sure.
jump. I'm not gonna dunk on people if I can do chin ups. So, it's crazy.
Yeah, I don't. I think trying to like do mental jujitsu and draw these weird through lines from one thing to the other, like it's not
Mhm.
like it is complicated, but it's not complicated, right? If you
Mhm.
want to jump better, probably just jump a lot.
Yeah, go ahead.
I had a little bit of a plyometric and jump journey myself. a couple years.
Okay.
I'm still now into it. It's part of what I do.
Mhm.
But coming from a hockey player, my tool bag for interacting with the ground in different ways was limited. Now I had other
Mhm.
sports, so I wasn't like, inept, but sprinting, big jumps, plyometrics, I had a lot of room for growth with that. And I got better at those things by doing those things.
Mhm.
Like it wasn't like, all right, let's drive up these squat numbers in pursuit of this big jump.
Sure.
I was also squatting heavy. I was squatting heavy and getting stronger, but I was also jumping a shitload too to get better at the
Sure.
jump.
Sure.
So it's like you don't have to get cute in like, oh, if you do this secret thing, this other thing's going to get better. You
Mhm.
do the thing, get generally strong too, just in general, but also practice the thing that you want to specifically get good at. You have to.
Sure. I was gonna ask how much time you had, because I had one more kind of bigger topic and then a couple rapid fire questions.
Yeah, man, I have about 25 minutes left
25 minutes. Okay,
and then
so
I got to scoop.
yeah, no worries. You talk about the feminine side and masculine side of training. It's a
Hmm.
concept that I came across somewhat recently. There's probably some people on the internet who hate the idea of feminine versus masculine and gender stereotypes. But I like the idea of there's the soft side and the hard side. There's the open, more loosey goosey, rhythmic sort of movements, and then the kind where you have to grunt and grind your teeth. Squat, bench, deadlift would be a more masculine side thing, or getting a crazy pump. But then you're talking about how you started getting into skipping, for example, which could be considered more
Hmm.
feminine or soft side. How did that become a thing for you? And can you describe that whole journey and the idea behind it for the listeners, please?
Yeah, man. I mean, my proclivity has always been towards the masculine side. Like I said, I fell in love with lifting weights when I was younger. So that was my tool for improvement. And I just like lifting weights. I like being
Mhm.
strong. I like having muscles. That is what my bias is towards. And kind of going back, circling back to the college and not having as much success in college discussion, that's what I kept beating that drum, that masculine side, like, oh, I'm not playing enough. I just need to double down. I need to go
Mhm.
harder with that. Where my room for improvement, so my bucket of strength and muscle was like pretty well
Cool.
taken care of. I had so much room for improvement with learning how to relax and
Mhm.
rhythm and flow
Mhm.
and being because I don't know if there's psychological, like I don't know if I have like a lot of like psychological tone or if that's even a thing. But when I would get into like the games, I would find myself muscling up and like
Mhm.
not being able to find that flow and to move freely and
Mhm.
express my movement the way that I wanted to. So just everything about me was the masculine side. It's very physical player.
Mhm.
I would just brick up and muscle up when I got into tense situations, and that would ultimately would lead into a lot of mistakes being made too because I couldn't flow and I couldn't relax. And when there was high pressure, my brain would do the same thing that my body was, physiologically expressing. So this didn't dawn on me until I don't know when exactly. I don't know if there was a light bulb moment, but for a long time, and even after athletics ended, I kept lifting weights because it's what I like to do. I was good at it. So I just kept hammering that. And then I guess probably the impetus of it or the very beginning of it was when I started getting more into plyometrics a few years back. And obviously there's some timing and some feeling aspects to that.
Uh-huh.
They're important if you want to be good at it. So then you start thinking about those types of things and how the body can move and how not just having strong muscles can make movement or result in a movement that you want to happen.
Mhm.
And then just paying attention more. Like I said, there's influences in the space. So I'm sure I've listened to plenty of podcasts where it's been a talk or a topic of discussion. And you see these guys too who aren't very big and very strong, but they can hit a baseball a mile or they can hit a golf ball a mile. And it's like,
Mhm.
where does that come from? Like they
Mhm.
can't even, they can't bench 135, but they can drive a golf ball 300 yards. Like
Mhm.
how is that a thing? So obviously there's another element to it.
Mhm.
There's, this, I don't want to get too into the weeds, but that elastic timing rhythm element to it, that is something that was just always a deficit for me. So, and I don't know if I'm answering your question here. And
Mhm.
I'm trying to more recently, I started diving more into this. I know what it was. So I worked myself into the ground over the past 2 years physically. I ran a couple programs. I developed my own program that I released, Gorilla Blueprint. Grab it if you want to get jacked and explosive. And before prior to that, I ran one of Will Rattel's programs. I ran the Haas project, the original one.
Mhm.
So I ran that. And then I started running mine, and then I ran mine again. So this was over the course of probably a year to a year and a half of like really like pushing for
Mhm.
progress. And the result of that was some injuries, some overuse injuries. I gave myself jumper's knee in both knees. Like I gave myself what I think is just like probably a tendinopathy, just a typical
Mhm.
anterior shoulder pain from just pressing too much.
Mhm.
What else? A hip flexor that is still, we're still working on a little bit. But all that to say, I ran
Yeah.
myself into the ground. So about midway through August of this summer, I was like, all right, I am going to take a step back from pushing performance and approach my training with more of a health lens in mind, like a little bit of a
Mhm.
rehab, not a physical therapist, but I follow a bunch of them online, so I'm qualified. No. So I just shifted my mindset as it pertained to my training, instead of trying
Mhm.
to push my jump height. And that's the thing too. I didn't want to lose all the things I had gained. And I
Mhm.
think that as we know, you can't peak year round, year after year. You
Mhm.
can't do it. Your body won't let you. But I didn't want to, I had learned how to dunk. I didn't want to lose that. I didn't want to lose
Mhm.
dunking, but my knees were like, you have to stop. You can't do this right now.
Mhm.
So it was a mindset shift, being okay losing some of the numbers with the jumps, some of the
Mhm.
numbers with the lifting, and accepting that and putting my rehab hat on and approaching training with more of a health outcomes as my KPIs rather than performance outcomes as my KPIs. So with that, I could slow down in the gym a little bit and I was still, training hard the areas that I
Mhm.
could train hard, but allowing myself to be okay with dialing things back and giving the areas of my body that needed the help and needed the
Mhm.
love or needed less inputs, that time and space to get better. So I think in slowing down with that, opened my mind and my attention up to other aspects besides just huge outputs. Because I love big
Mhm.
outputs. Who doesn't love big jumps and big lifts? It's
Mhm.
great. It's fun. And that's what I love. But so I guess divorcing myself from that for a little while allowed me to, I guess, venture into this more feminine side of training with where we have
Mhm.
considerations of movement and rhythm and timing. And so I started doing things just like slamming a med ball. Super
Mhm.
simple, but like trying to like whip it into the ground instead of muscling it into the ground,
Sure.
not muscling up from one side to the other, but finding that flow and getting that
Mhm.
snap, that crack at the end of the whip, which is who did I steal that from? The baseball. He's like 108 performance is his Instagram handle. But I love that
Mhm.
terminology, that picture of the cracking of the whip, because it's that
Mhm.
timing and you let it happen when it's supposed to happen. So
Mhm.
just experimenting with things like that and I guess, again, that rehab journey opened me up to these other considerations and these other areas of training besides just the big outputs. And eventually here, when everything's shored up, when my hip is where it needs to be, I want to get into speed. And I know in order to sprint, I've never been fast. My 40 time when I was in college was the same 40 time that Tom Brady ran at his combine.
Oh,
I
wow.
won't say it out loud, but you
Gotcha.
can go. Yeah, it wasn't good. Wasn't good. So I'm confident my goal eventually is to beat my college. It's not a lofty goal. It's not a very high
Mhm.
bar. So I want to get into speed training. And I know
Uh-huh.
a big part of that for me to have success with that is going to be learning to relax while doing something intense, and then
Mhm.
have that marriage of
Mhm.
relaxation and intensity and the right balance to let things happen and find
Mhm.
out what I'm truly capable of. Because I
Mhm.
got to get away from the tension, from breaking up and muscling up and trying to grit
Sure.
my way through things. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but that's the stuff that is interesting me right now.
So, yeah, the masculine side doesn't surprise me. I can tell by your mustache. That doesn't happen by mistake. But then I was
Appreciate
gonna
that.
say it's interesting because, you mentioned sprinting, and I thought that right off the bat, sprinting is maybe one of the most athletic things that you can do, and it is the marriage of some people call it relaxed violence, but people also talk about
Mm,
contract, relax, the
I
ability
like
to
that.
contract quickly and relax quickly. You were someone that biased the contraction aspect and not the relaxation aspect, and so
Hmm.
maybe the one thing that was your limiting factor is your ability to maybe it's mobility, maybe it's rhythm, maybe it's coordination, maybe it's, whatever it may be, the relaxation aspect, the sequencing like you're talking about, whipping a ball instead of muscling it. And then on the flip side, you might have somebody who's a ballet dancer. They have all those elements, the soft side, feminine side, and all that stuff. But then they want to go play a sport like rugby. They might get folded. Do you know what I mean? At the first contact, and they might need to have some grit and
Hmm.
some grind and some muscle in that sense. So I do think it's important to kind of like, and that's what I think is more important is athlete specific programming as opposed to sport specific programming. You might say, okay, you play this sport, you need to do this. But if you already have your bucket full on the grind side, then you might, because like I would imagine there's some more graceful, elegant hockey players that maybe can't dish out a hit or take
Sure.
a hit best. That person might benefit more from the style of training that you succeed at. And then for
Hmm.
you, for example, it may have been the opposite. So I do think it's important to do that kind of needs analysis and then to program around that. And then to speak about like martial arts, for example, in Muay Thai, they just talk about the whip all the time. That if you're loose, you're fast, and if you're fast, you're powerful and strong and all that stuff. But you don't get there through trying to like muscle. You can't push a punch. You have to let it flow. You have to let it whip. Same thing with the kick. And then the other thing too is like jujitsu to me is interesting because it is actually diverse. You do have your big meaty guys that can just pressure and smash and force you into certain positions with their strength and being super tense. But then you also have your other guys that they invert and they wrap their legs around and they're like a boa constrictor. So it's interesting that like some sports will demand one thing more, some will demand it less, and then some you actually have options. I'm not a big person. I don't have the choice to pressure and smash and do that with jujitsu. I have to learn to relax and flow and do all these different things, which is why, I have two clients. They're both 6'4", 220. They're both meatheads. They both like doing powerlifting, bodybuilding style stuff. But then, like you're saying, I hear, oh, my shoulder hurts, my knee hurts, something. And I said, can you indulge me for a phase or we focus a little bit more on your health? We focus on your heart and lung health. We do some more conditioning. We focus on your mobility. We do some more movement challenges, some more flow based stuff, a little bit of jumping and all that stuff. And even though that is so different from what they typically say they want to do, they actually felt so great. They're like, I like this program. I like what it's doing for me. And it allows me to go play sports with my kids or go to the track with them or something like that when I wouldn't be able to do it otherwise without pulling something. So I really appreciate that analogy. I think it's something that a lot of coaches can learn. If you have the time for it, I just want to ask a couple rapid fire questions.
Yeah, man, let's do it.
Is there anything that you've changed your mind on recently or in your career that you want to share?
I mean, we already touched on it, but the sports specificity thing. When I was new into the game, I was, because coming from a weightlifting background, like you're
Mhm,
doing. Now, I didn't do as much jumping and as sprinting
mhm,
as I should have, but you're doing all the meat and the meat and potatoes, like the
mhm,
the basic stuff, the tools that we still use. So you come into the profession and the strength and conditioning field. It's like, okay, now I'm going to learn the secret stuff, the secret sauce, the sports
yeah, yeah, yeah.
specific,
There's no
you
secret.
know,
Yeah,
high level stuff.
yeah.
So, that's not a recent realization, but that's been a big one for me as a coach. Something else I've changed my mind. I guess more recently too, like, putting more stock into the feminine side of training. And to your point too, appreciating the fact that some athletes might need more emphasis on that part of training, where others
Mhm.
might maybe need to inject a little bit more grit and a little bit more muscle into, literally and what's the other word?
Figuratively.
Whatever. Thank you. That's the one. Figuratively into their focus and
Mhm,
into their training. And also to your point, ensuring that those things have maybe just, I like to have those things concurrently throughout each
mhm,
session where we get a little bit of the feminine, we get some
mhm,
movement, we get some flow, then we get some intensity, then we get some strong stuff. So they're all going to get tastes of it, but maybe a specific kid I need to have a little conversation with, or maybe make sure that their intent is really here on this thing that they
mhm,
probably need a little bit more emphasis on. But yeah, appreciating the value in those other parts of training that maybe previously I was like, it's kind of woo woo or soft or, what have you, whatever outlook I had.
mhm.
Um,
Another question is there any kind of misconception that you're seeing a lot in the training space that you want to dispel?
Myths or misconceptions. I feel like I want to just keep going and hammering that the sports specificity drum because that's the one I
Sure.
see quite a bit. Myths or misconceptions. I feel like I used up my myths or mis. If I come up with a good one, we'll come back to that one. But yeah, I guess I'll use the same answer again. I know that's lame.
Sure. Is there a positive change you're noticing in the space?
Yeah, man, I think there's a lot. Mind you, I haven't been in the space forever, but just by listening
Mhm,
to guys who have, I mean, it's always been a part of my life. I was a T Nation rat way
mhm.
back in 2013, 2014. So I guess I have had touches with the space, just not as a professional for that long. But I think
Mhm,
a big positive trend is the willingness of coaches to communicate, and I think
mhm,
for all the evils that social media has, that's been one really positive one for me is connecting with
mhm,
other coaches.
mhm,
Guys are willing to talk about what they're doing. And podcasts have been great too. Just
mhm,
hearing these conversations and kind of dispelling this idea of like secret sauce and like, that's the same thing the way I think. Or there is something different that I haven't considered, or here's a different
mhm,
angle or outlook on something. So I think the willingness of coaches to connect and to communicate and share what they're doing rather than gatekeeping and trying to have that that aura of like this is the secret stuff that we do here is a great trend.
If I can speak to that just super quick, I appreciate that you say that because that's not talked about that often. I find there was definitely a time where a coach might be like, "Oh, I don't want them to copy my methods and techniques and strategies and all that." And now you do have coaches that are sharing their ideas back and forth. And one of the things that was really helpful for me early in my career was before I even knew how to build my business, there was a coach in my area who worked with specifically women. And if ever a male client would reach out to her, she'd say, I don't work with men, but here's someone who can. So she gave me a lot of referrals. I asked her, I was like, why would you do that? I'm competition. She said, I believe in community, not competition. There's more than enough people that need training, and there's more than enough trainers for those people.
Mm.
You know, we can all have a slice of the pie, that whole kind of concept. And it was such a great early example of what the space could be because I could have come across a bunch of other coaches that just said, he's an idiot. Don't work with him. I'm the best. You got to work with me. And that may be how it's been for a long time, but I don't feel that. And the other thing too is in conversations like this, maybe you learned something, maybe I learned something, but it elevates the space as a whole. And then if you're on your toes, that's just going to make you better. If you just raise the floor for everybody, that just makes all of us better. So I do think it's nice that we're actually having these conversations. Another
Yeah,
question I wanted to ask
100%,
you
dude.
is, so I have two more questions. One is what feels like a touchdown in your job?
A touchdown in my job? That's a very good question. I mean, it's great, dude. It's great when, you train a kid leading up to their season and then they have success in the season and then they're appreciative of the training and the help. That stuff's all great. I love that stuff. What really gets my juices flowing, dude, is someone gaining a power back or building a positive relationship with the process. And it doesn't have to be an athlete. It can be a general population client. So I'll speak more to Gen Pop here, but people who get powers back, like they haven't jumped in years, and we get to a point where now they can jump. I've got a 64-year-old guy in the gym who, when he first showed up, typical overweight, beat up, blue collar guy. So had a bunch of, prior injuries and surgeries and all this stuff, and got to a point where he's jumping on 30-inch boxes, dude. Like,
Awesome.
gaining powers back and doing things that they didn't think they had access to anymore. Like, oh, this part of my life is done. And no, it's not. It doesn't have to be. So those are really cool ones for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Gaining powers back are pretty cool.
Mine's kind of similar. I've had stories like that. Like I had a client who lost 80 pounds and then was playing pickleball and he overran a shot because he's like, I didn't know my body was that capable, but I actually overran
Yeah,
it. And
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
that's pretty cool. And I also like seeing when people, my business is called Empower Performance. I want to empower people
Mhm.
to take fitness into their own hands and all that stuff. I want to educate them, I want to inspire them, all these different things. But then when they start adding activities outside of training, or they do an extra workout on their own because they like it so much, I started some clients bought some heavy bags. I'm just showing them some stuff they can do on the heavy bag just for like conditioning. I'm not saying I'm super qualified or I'm prepping them for a fight. It's just a good way to get the heart rate up, right? When they say that they're like
Mhm.
looking forward to doing it, and they have a big smile on their face or something like that, that also gets my juices flowing, like what you're saying, people enjoying the process. The
Mhm.
final question I had for you before signing off is, do you have a final piece of advice that can be given to literally anybody about literally anything? It doesn't have to be training related if you don't want it to be.
A piece of advice for literally anybody about anything. It's a good question. And this is not original at all, but keep going, keep going with whatever arena of life that you're in. Uh, if you're lucky enough to find the thing that you want to do that gives you purpose, you can be great at that thing. There's like,
Mhm.
we're all just people. If you're willing to put in the time and the hours and the energy, you can be great at that thing, but you have to keep going and it doesn't happen overnight. And we can liken this to training. Like you're not going to walk in the gym and you're not going to squat 500 pounds the first day. But if that's something that you want to do, you can put in the time if you understand delayed gratification and you're okay with the hiccups along the way and the injuries that come and the setbacks that come, you can do that thing. If you can find your thing and you can commit to it, you can make it happen. So, and that's kind of a mantra that I've had kind of in this process too, in the career change to strength and conditioning. My mantra has just been keep going. Like,
Mhm.
I love it. I know I'm doing the right things. Not everything's perfect every day, and not something doesn't happen every day. There's not a win every single day. Maybe there's little wins that now I can appreciate, but the big wins that you think like, oh, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. I'm going to get this client. I'm going to put out this, Instagram post or this thing, and I'm going to get all these clients.
Mhm.
That's not how it works. It'd be sweet if it did, but oftentimes you're not going to have those, like the work that you're putting in is not going to have an immediate result. You're planting seeds for something cool to happen to tomorrow. But if more often than not you're doing the right things, yeah, you're taking the right steps. When something cool is ready to happen, you'll be ready for it. So yeah,
Mhm.
keep going.
Cool. I really appreciate that. I was just gonna add one more thing to that, and then, have you plug yourself, and we can sign off so I can respect your time, but
Sure.
it took me a little while to realize that the difference between 15 minutes of fame and an overnight success is staying power, and that staying power comes with all the work that went into it. Do you know what I mean? So an overnight success isn't actually an overnight success. They just needed that one
Hmm.
catalyst, but they at least did the thing you're talking about, the whole keep going thing, for a really long time, and it finally happened for them. The whole 15 minutes of fame type of people, they don't have that, going into it. So they're just gonna have their moment, and then they're gonna disappear into oblivion because they have no staying power because they have nothing, no foundation. So you can't
Sure.
earn overnight so you can't fake an overnight success, you have to earn it.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
can you be found if people wanna find you? Do you wanna plug your business? You mentioned your program, any of that stuff?
Yeah, man. So I'm most active on Instagram right now, and it's at coach_Whyte, and that's White with a Y, WHITE. So I'm Steven with a PH and White with a Y. So every time I have to tell someone a name, I need to clarify both parts of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, coach at coach_Whyte on Instagram and on YouTube. My goal in this new year is to get into some longer form content. So hopefully some longer YouTube videos will be coming out. And on Instagram, I have all my stuff. I've got a off-season program biased towards tissue development, size, strength, while still being able to move and be powerful, all that good stuff. And I have an in-season and a preseason program that are in testing right now. I've got a few athletes that are running them right now. I'm going to run them myself. So those are in the pipeline. And all my coaching info is on Instagram. Link in bio.
But I wanna thank you for your time. This was an absolute blast.
Yeah, man, it was a genuine pleasure, and yeah, I appreciate you reaching out and having me on.
Yeah, cool. Best of luck for the future.
Same to you, brother.